this is great. This goes back to some of the female stuff. I should have put it up over here. I might stitch it together later on my videos. Men want us to have kids so bad they can pay us for it. As in a real full-time salary. I'm not throwing my life away and sacrificing myself, everything, to uplift a man while he only benefits from my sacrifice. I'm not putting myself at the mercy of a man taking care of me, while I am working like a horse to uplift him in his career, just unpaid and without credit. Dude, the way these women talk about women who want to be housewives and mothers is kind of fucked up, I'm not going to lie. Men are the ones who have always wanted marriage and babies. See what I mean about being brainwashed? Men are the ones who always wanted marriage and babies. Not us. It's quite clear seeing how it is being pushed so hard on women now when we are so many opting out fully. When so many of us are opting out fully is what you're trying to say. I don't owe men babies or the government. Not my duty, not my problem. Yeah, that's the problem though, is that when people stop seeing it as their duty to continue their civilization dies. And this is something that Tim Pool said a lot, is that if you are a default liberal, you're less likely to have children. You're also less likely to have lots of children. So even if you do have children, you're probably only going to have one or two at most. And the vast majority of them are probably not going to have any kids. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that the vast majority of children get their morals and politics from their parents, specifically their mother. And so what that boils down to is that you'll have more religious, more conservative females breeding more, raising more children who have more conservative and more Christian values, or religious values, just by default. Because Muslims are doing it too. To a greater extent than Christians are, by the way. And so it's not your duty, not your problem, but it will be the next generation's problem. And the generation after that's problem. Right? Because if there are less people like you, 2X chromosomes, if there are less people like you who have this view, then guess what? It loses. Because we live in a democracy. So and see, one of the things that people on Red Team scream about all the time is, yeah, this is what you're saying is true about the breeding stuff, but they indoctrinate kids into liberal shit, and it's like, yeah, that's going to be a problem. But think about someone like me, right? I grew up in a pseudo conservative environment. My mom was a single mom, so it was a little bit different, right? They made a little bit of leeway for that, and I was always the black sheep, and so was she. But, my family was very religious, very conservative, not as Bible thumping to the point where, they do all the crazy bad shit. None of that really happened. But those were the values that I was raised with. And school didn't make me a fucking liberal or any of that shit. I'm a liberal because those are the values that I have. And some of them are actually come from the Christian value system, like the whole fact that everyone is equal before God and that our rights come from God. Though I don't believe though I don't believe a God actually exists, not in the form that the religions of humanity say it does, that doesn't mean it's not a useful fiction for me to perpetuate my worldview, which is that humans are all morally equal, and therefore our institutions and governments should treat us as if we are, and that only really our behavior should be taken into account when judging someone for any crime they may have committed, or when judging them if they have committed a crime at all. Like, should you take into account certain things when sentencing someone? Like, oh, this person is fucking sane and cannot actively comprehend what they're doing, so obviously we can't give them a normal trial, so we're gonna put them in an insane asylum instead, right? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So if you take into account, somebody grew up in the fucking ghetto all their lives and all they were supposed to is fucking crime and shit, and then they go out and commit a crime, they're like fucking 18 or something, and it's one of the first crimes they've ever committed, it's like you can understand sentencing being a little bit lenient. But if you've got a rap sheet 10 miles long and you're 15 years old, then you're not coming back from that, dude. You're going to need some hard shit to make you come back from that. So this really boils down to, this is one of the reasons I say, propaganda, is because it's not my duty, not my problem. This is what she's been propagandized into believing. This is how her worldview has been warped, because she's not seeing past her own lifetime. She doesn't want to build anything to last 1,000 years. That's essentially what's going on. And because she doesn't care about that, everything is about her specifically and not about anybody else around her, right? As a husband and a father, I have taken responsibility for the safety and security of my family. That includes my wife and my children. And in return, I get things for that, and my wife, for giving me those things, gets protection, security, and emotional safety with me, right? She gets the things that she needs from me. I get the things I need from her. And together, our marriage is specifically for children. That's what marriage is for. It's not to make you happy. It's not any of that bullshit. That's not what marriage is for. Marriage is for children. So it's one of these things. It's like, if you're not going to have children, you can get married, sure. But the point of marriage is to give you something to hold over yourself as a higher standard of, I can't just think about myself. I have to make my marriage work so that my children are in the best possible space, right? And so it's not about your marriage making you happy. It's about your marriage creating a stable household so that you can raise children in it. When you're old and feeble, who will hold your shaking hands? Oh, well, I mean, if you ask someone like this, they'll be like, oh, the people in the nursing home, that I'm going to end up paying for because I got a really good job. I won't have to depend on children or any of that stuff. And it's like, that's a fair argument if you care about that kind of thing, but a lot of these people don't. They don't give a fuck, right? My whole thing is it's like, okay, so so how I would approach a person like this, if they said something like this, not my duty, not my problem, would be like, okay, so you like your politics, right? You wish your politics were the norm for the entirety of the country, right? That everybody was super progressive like you are, everybody was for abortion like you are. You want that, right? And they would probably say yes. And it's like, well, guess what's going to happen? Because the vast majority of people who believe in the same politics that you do also believe that it is not your duty to breed, so it's not your fucking problem. What that means is that in 1 or 2 generations, if this keeps iterating on itself, then your entire political scheme will just fucking lose, right? Because the progressive movement won't go away, but what it will do is it will retract from the most crazy fucking hyper-progressive commie bullshit and skew more conservative. So there will be individuals who are born to religious households that will become liberals, but that doesn't mean they'll necessarily become crazy commie progressives, right? Kind of like me. So what that means is that a lot of the stuff that she believes will end up dying off because she's not perpetuating her civilization. She's not taking responsibility for the future. That's what this boils down to. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I think the whole reason this thing was made was because of this right here. Not my duty, not my problem. Excuse me 1 second. The nursing home workers will have to be someone's children. Yeah, but I think you might be missing what I'm putting out here when I'm saying that they don't really care about that, because they know they'll be taken care of because either the government safety net or because they'll have like a retirement thing where they'll be able to pay for it, that kind of deal, right? So they can justify that. But I do think the vast majority of this thing was written specifically because of this right here, duty. Not my problem. She feels no obligation to the future, to her civilization at all. And like, I gotta wonder where this came from, right? Because this is like commie brain rot. This is what communism does to your brain, right? Because if you want to, the flip side of that is what does traditionalism and religiosity do to your brain? We have plenty of those. We everybody knows. We all know. The fucking closeted gay dude who's screaming that homosexuals should be killed. That's what religiosity and fucking all that shit does to your brain, right? That's what this does. This woman is completely disconnected from the things that the vast majority of humans throughout the vast majority of time have actually been connected to. And it's not just having children that does it, right? You don't have to have children to contribute to the future, right? So like somebody who's like Scott Adams, who doesn't have his own natural children, not only has he raised 2 stepchildren, but he also contributes to the world in other ways that, make the world better. That's literally what he says he's been doing this entire time with his fucking podcast show, is trying to put ideas out into the world that will make the world better. So that's definitely a way you can do it. But the problem in but see, that's the thing, is he says he feels like it's his duty, because he's not going to be being a biological father. That's just wasn't in the cards for him. And he knew that. And so he knew his duty was to help perpetuate civilization, was to help civilization in some way. And so since the biological children weren't in the way, he changed it to, well, I'm going to help improve civilization in another way that will benefit other people's children. That's fair. But this person is completely and utterly sworn off the duty to one's own civilization, right? Because it's like this. Think about it like this. How many of your ancestors do you believe suffered and died in horrible ways suffered their entire life, and then possibly died in horrible ways simply so you could exist? I can say, if you can't see future and you don't want kids, good, I don't want more of you around. Pretty much, yeah. And funnily enough, being an adulterer and a philanderer does not actually guarantee that your line will be perpetuated as much as you think it will. My father was one of these men, and he has 4 children that I know of, possibly 5 or 6. And out of the 4 children that I know of, only 2 of them have bred. My half brother has a single child, and I have a single child. So my father, who had a lot of children, some of them out of wedlock, and you'd think, oh, well, his genes are going to survive. And yeah, they will, maybe. But my son probably might not ever be able to be in a relationship, right? Depending on how he progresses once he hits certain stages in his life. I don't know yet. But it may be the case. And what if, his other grandchild decides not to procreate as well? His line dies right there. Right? Yeah. So just because you go out and spread your seed doesn't mean it's actually going to survive. This is why one of the main ways that humans have been able to maintain those kinds of things is because you invest a lot of if you invest a lot of resources and time into your children, they turn out pretty well, and they end up doing the same thing. Or they can if you do it right. And that's the goal. That's really the goal. If men want babies, they can pay us a salary for it, or invent artificial wombs, or figure out how to do it themselves. Being paid a salary should be the least we are given, since they are the ones who want this so bad, and we are the ones going through hell to bring life. I would still not do it. That says it all right there, man. But this is honestly the bare minimum. Make it a movement, not my problem. And that's really what it boils down to. This person has literally no connection to the past, no connection to our ancestors, no connection to anything in the future. Everything is about me, and everything is about now. And it's honestly sad. It really is. It's like, so it's more than likely that this person ended up having to grow up in a pseudo-conservative household that either was or pretended to be Christian, and they possibly used that as a bludgeon against her throughout her life for all her misdeeds that she did. Instead of properly disciplining her, they used emotional blackmail with religion. It's entirely possible that's one of the reasons she's this way, is because to have this kind of worldview, it's usually one of 2 things, or a combination of the 2. And it's, you had a bad childhood with your parents, and they were bad to you. And you also got caught up in a pseudo-communist ideology that basically told you that none of that shit's your problem, and you should focus on you. And there's some truth to that, except for that it's not your problem. No, it is your problem. It absolutely is. And that's the difference between somebody who takes responsibility for their civilization and somebody who does not. This person, you got to remember, this is a person who probably advocates for all the stupid shit that the other lady said that the White House was taken away from them, right? This is that shit. Let me bring it back up. 1 second. So, in the last thing that we looked at, it was, where was it? Yeah, right here. This. While denying us reproductive rights, health care, paid leave, affordable housing, equal pay, destroying education is truly dystopian. Where is it? Where is it? There we go. So, this. I recall a parallel from the Bible. Man sows carelessly and reaps a poor harvest, while most grains fall upon poor ground. Yeah. And I mean, of course you can make allegories to that. And, I don't believe the Bible is true, but I do believe there's a lot of truth in the Bible, in that there's a lot of stories in there that give you essentially moral lessons based on the worldview of essentially fucking Jews and early Christians of that time. And so it's just like with any other religion, you're going to have stories that, tell you how to be a good person, or tell you the things that you should look for in other people to know if they're good or bad, right? But this is a person who has been completely disconnected from their civilization. They show no responsibility at all for any of the stuff. Because if you want your politics to survive, you must breed and pass them on to the next generation and ensure that that next generation also passes them on. So it is one of the more interesting aspects of the commie gobbledygook, is that because it completely separates you from your from your ancestors' tradition and all these other things, and makes it not your duty, not your problem. It completely eschews duty, right? And the reason I brought this back up is because this type of person probably says all of this shit, right? So they want reproductive rights, healthcare, childcare, paid leave, affordable housing, equal pay, and education. All these things. All these things. This person most likely agrees with all of that shit, right? So they think that the government and the rest of the people have a duty to them, but they do not have a duty to us or our future. Same person who would bitch about climate change because we got to save our future, because the future we're going to kill everything. Not my duty. Not my duty. But it's everybody else's duty. Right? It's everybody else's duty, but not hers. That is the crux of this. This does appear to me to be pure, unadulterated, just selfish behavior. That everything is about me. I don't give a fuck about anything else. Fuck everybody else. I get mine. That's what this feels like it boils down to. And this person wants the government and the people to have all these duties to protect, to serve, to ensure that their life is good and not horrible and all this other bullshit, but they have no duty to perpetuate that system. And this is one of the real kickers for me that makes it really near evil, is that these people want things like Social Security and safety nets similar to them. What they don't realize is that when people in the government, like who's Elon Musk, I think, said it recently, that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. If you describe Social Security and disconnect it from the government, it is a Ponzi scheme because it is built like a Ponzi scheme. The difference is the government can make that promise that an individual man cannot make. And if you don't know what a Ponzi scheme is, it's basically like you seek out investment from people saying you've got this amazing thing. And what they do is they give you money, right? And you promise them returns on their money. But instead of selling the product or making the product and getting returns via like the normal market, what happens is you seek out more investors and you use the new investors to give money to the old investors. And you keep doing this and you keep doing this and you keep doing this. And eventually it breaks down because you eventually run out of new investors. And then all your old investors are still seeking the money that they want, that you promised them, and you don't get it. But that's exactly how Social Security works, is that the current generation that is working right now is paying for the Social Security payments of the people who are elderly and having Social Security. It's not just in some gigantic fund, right? That, I put my money in, it's not like you put it in the bank and it just sits there and then you get to withdraw it. That's not how Social Security works. That's not how it works at all. It works in the way that you pay the government money, the government spends that fucking money, and when you need your Social Security, they literally tax it from other people and or print more money to give you that money. It works just like disability, just like my VA disability does. There's no giant pot of money that somebody paid in for 50 years that's just sitting there for them. In fact, I think Social Security would be a lot better if we did something and we made it like a Roth IRA where you have a Social Security account where your money goes, and it's like a Roth IRA where it compounds interest over time, and then that's your money. The government can't take it. It's your money. It's your money. But with Social Security, it's not your money, it's the government's money, and they're giving it in their you give it to them as technically like a loan, and they give it back with interest, essentially, based on like current what's going on. So the reason it's not a Ponzi scheme in and of itself is because the government can fulfill that promise, because it can print money, essentially. And it takes in taxes. And so they want these Social Security nets, they want them to continue into the future, but they don't want to pay for it. And how do you pay for it in the future? You have children. Because see, her children are going to be the ones who are going to be paying Social Security when she's drawing Social Security. And so if she doesn't contribute to our civilization by having children, then when she's old and needs Social Security, there will be less children available. There will be less adults at that time who've grown from the children that she's made to pay for Social Security. And so imagine if you have an entire group of people, you have 100 people, right? 50 of them decide not to have children, but they all get Social Security. So what happens is that when they all reach elderly age, you have 100 people in elderly age, but you only have 50 people's children to hold them up. So it's less stable. There's less money to go around. You continue this in perpetuity, and eventually you have a small group of people who are producing all of the children, and those children are the ones who are working, paying for the Social Security safety net of the vast majority of the people who are not having children. This is one of those things where it's like, it's a compounding problem that if you don't continue the next generation, then you're going to have issues because our system is literally built that way. And it will be a problem, maybe. Hopefully not. Maybe we'll get automation and we'll all go on UBI and it'll be just fucking fine. And it'll be all right. I don't know, but it might be. It might be. Anyway, like I said, this is one of these things where it's like, when you forego your duty to your civilization, you're basically giving up. You might as well just surrender at this point. Like, because you're basically saying that I don't give a fuck if Nazis completely take over my country. I'm just going to let them do it. Yep, because Nazis breed. And if you're a stupid fucking commie fuckstick, you don't. Funny how that works.